Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation of Swallow the Stars. This will be Part 38, Chapter 38, entitled Chaos in Hosu. Hosu City in the daytime is distinguishable from Musutafu because it's more densely populated. Cars line the streets like ever-traveling rivers. Pedestrians pack onto the sidewalks with barely enough room to keep from pressing shoulders together. It's busy, it's popular, and it's dense. But at night, Hosu and Musutafu are the same. It's day 3 of the week-long internships, and Izuku stands on the edge of a rooftop just breathing in the night air. Cleaner than its daytime counterpart, less populated by exhaust and the general smells that drift up from restaurants and too many people. It's not actually clean, but Izuku isn't bothered by a detail like that. There's still traffic, still people, still sounds and sights of life, but Izuku can breathe in a way that he just can't under the light of the sun. He's decked out in his hero costume for the first time in what feels like forever, though it's only been a couple of weeks. It feels good, sturdy, and he likes that he has his knives and tambo with him for extra security. This is the first time he's been on a patrol, not just here in Hosu, but ever, and it's hard to guess what they're going to run into, if anything. Izuku would rather be prepared. Jeddah hops up next to him and surveys the street and alleyways below them. Costume is beautiful and flowy in a way that gives an almost ripped look. It's black and tight except for those loose strips which are basically support items in their own right, if Izuku is remembering the details of her quirk correctly. Anything catch your eye, Void? A small thrill runs through Izuku at the use of his hero name. He's known that Void would be his hero name for a while now, but it's different when it comes from the mouth of a pro-hero, when it's acknowledgement that he's putting in the work and that he's on the path he wants to be on. It feels good, like maybe everything he's been through has been worth it because it's led him to here. Nothing yet, Izuku responds, though that's probably by design, right? He turns his head to her and grins, the expression visible because he hasn't pulled up his respirator yet. He needs to find someone in the support department to talk to about it, because it's a little heavier than he wants it to be after hanging around his neck for a while. Jeddah laughs. Nothing gets past you, huh? Yeah, we're on an easy route tonight. Lots of main streets, probably won't see any action. Izuku understands that. Had been expecting it even. This isn't a work study, and he doesn't have his provisional license. It's a first-year internship. Even if they do come across a villain, Izuku won't really be allowed to engage. The point of this patrol is to get him used to the rhythm of the job, and for Jeddah to give him tips and pieces of advice when she feels like it. She's been a great mentor so far, and Izuku's already learned a lot in the hour and a half that they've been outside of the agency. All right, let's go, kid, Jeddah says, backing away from the edge of a roof. 2 more streets this way, and then we'll... An explosion rips through the air. Izuku swings around and drops into a crouch in the same movement, scanning his eyes along what little of the horizon he can see before he catches sight of a distant plume of smoke and flames. Shit. Jeddah pulls up her half-mask, and Izuku scrambles to do the same with his respirator. Another explosion booms out, the fire bursting into existence before the sound reaches Izuku's ears. We're going to head that way and see if we can help, Jeddah says, steel sliding into her tone. You listen to me. I'm giving you permission to use your quirk, but only in self-defense or to help civilians, got it? Izuku nods his understanding. Not sure if his throat is working right now. He feels like he's already inhaling smoke as hard as rabbiting in his chest. Anxiety over a series of explosions in downtown Hosu taking hold of him and running. But the need to help people swallows all of that, and he feels himself calm down under the tidal wave of Jeddah's words from a few days ago. A whole lot of good, that's what. They take off together, jumping between rooftops for as long as they can before they have to drop to the streets. Civilians are starting to populate the sidewalks, leaning out of bars or stepping out of apartment buildings and 24-hour stores. More explosions sound, and Izuku can tell by the pieces of the conversation he snatches as he runs that the fire is spreading and that downtown is a veritable war zone. He hears Jeddah yelling for people to go back inside, to hunker down until this is over, but Izuku's too focused on getting there to be able to help spread the message. Not that anyone's listening anyway. They're on the outskirts of downtown when a noise, not an explosion, reaches Izuku's ears. It's a screech, inhuman, and it makes his blood run cold. Blood and cracked cement, a fountain running red, his dad hanging limp in a monster's grip. Instinct takes over, and Izuku grabs Jeddah's arm and yanks her down an alley where he stops, panting for breath, eyes wide as he looks around. Void, what the hell? She doesn't raise her voice, but Izuku can hear the disbelief and exasperation toward his actions even without it. Nomu, he says, nearly a whisper, as he pushes the word through his panting breath. There are Nomu here. Jeddah's eyes narrow. The fuck is a Nomu? You have 3 seconds before I order you back to the agency and go help on my own. Panic slides down Izuku's spine at the same time as Amahaki twisting in his ribs, and he curls closer to his collarbone. The USJ attack on UA several weeks ago. You heard about it, right? when all those villains showed up?" he asked, and Jetta nods. Izuku returns the gesture, trying to organize his thoughts, even as another inhuman screech echoes down the street. There was something else there. Something that didn't make it onto the news because it was gone at the end, before the other heroes arrived. A big creature, exposed brain, created by the villains to kill All Might. For a long moment, far longer than her threatened 3 seconds, Jetta just stares at him. Then she blinks and she finally speaks. "Why was it gone at the end?" Izuku tries to hold in his wince but can't, so he turns around to sweep his gaze over the street instead, looking for the creature that still sometimes haunts his nightmares. "Because I used my quirk on it, and it vaporized." Holy shit. The sound of Jetta pacing a small, tight line comes to Izuku's ears, but he doesn't turn around. He lets her muffled cursing wash over him, and only tunes back in when she snaps her fingers to get his attention. Okay, so clearly whatever this is, it's those same villains. She nods to herself, even though Izuku just stares at her. Right. New plan. Avoid the Nomu, don't head into the city center, and make sure civilians are safe. Izuku likes this plan. It's a good plan, especially the avoiding the Nomu part. Jetta pulls out her phone, which is vibrating in her grasp, and holds up a hand for Izuku to wait. "Jetta," she answers, eyes moving over Izuku's shoulder and then down to the other end of the alley. "Yeah, I was just told that exact information." A pause. "Great." A longer pause. "Oh, good. Tell him not to start any unnecessary fires." She snorts out a laugh and paces a few steps into the alley before turning on her heel. "Got it, boss man. Boyd and I are going to start wrapping around the outer edges. If we need to move, give me another call." She hangs up. Izuku raises his eyebrows. "Dark knock?" He knows the answer already, but he figures he should ask. She nods. "He's helping to coordinate rescue efforts. Endeavor apparently arrived in the city an hour ago, so he's heading the main effort downtown." Izuku grimaces, and Jetta grunts in agreement. "He's a piece of work, but I'd rather him fight those Nomu than me." She slaps his arm, and the stumbled step Izuku takes to stay upright knocks a bit of the fear loose that had started to cling to him at the sound of the Nomu. "Let's go save people, kid." They leave the relative safety of the alley and start running again, though this time not at any breakneck speeds. The first few streets they pass are sparsely populated, but after they turn a corner, Izuku realizes that it's just because people are starting to cluster together in certain areas to get a better look at what's happening further into the city. This time, Izuku joins Jetta in telling them all to go home, to get off the streets, to let the heroes handle the situation. It's only 2 streets later, when Izuku's vision clouds with chaos. Before now, everything had looked normal. Even while sirens and smoke had filled the distant air, screams from civilians and screeches from Nomu rising with them into the night sky. But now, the mask had been lifted. 2 buildings are on fire, one partially exploded, rubble litters the street and embeds itself into cars, alarms blare, and police do their best to hold civilians away from the scorching flames. Jetta curses and picks up the pace, and Izuku slides into step with her easily. "Are there people in there?" she calls, and Izuku focuses on where she's looking to see Pro-Hero Backdraft, trying to put out the fire. The other Pro doesn't turn to look. "Not in this one," he says, loud enough to be heard over both his water and the roaring of the fire. "Manuel's over at the other place, helping the fire department. Check with him." Manuel? Why is that name so familiar? Jetta leads the way to the other building, Izuku right on her heels. The normal hero, Manuel, is standing beside a couple of firefighters, using his quirk to direct the water further into the building than the hoses can reach alone. "Manuel," Jetta says, having to raise her voice to be heard over the crackling and the popping of the fire. "Any victims?" Unlike Backdraft, Manuel turns to Jetta's and Izuku's arrival with a tight smile. "Nope, this place was fully closed down when this fire started, thankfully, but I left my intern down that way." He tips his head to the side, unable to move his hands while using his quirk. "Escorting civilians out. The commission wants an evacuation order carried out, so if you're looking for something to do, I'd start down there." His intern. Shit. Ida's here, and Izuku would not put it past Stain to use the chaos to his advantage for another strike, for another chance at taking down a hero, and Ida, in his hero costume, looks so similar to Ingenium that if Stain catches sight of him, it would probably not end well. There's a moment where fear and concern for his classmates cinches Izuku's chest so tightly that he's unable to get so much as a gasp of air into his lungs, and then there's a screech, far too close for comfort, and Izuku whips around to find himself staring down a Nomu just over a dozen meters away. Panic laces through Izuku like a live wire, and the static in his head rises with intensity. This is just like the creature that nearly killed Aizawa, that nearly took his dad away from him. This is just like the creature that was built with the strength and speed to take down All Might. He hears Jetta swear beside him, but can't fully comprehend the words. This is the worst thing that could have happened tonight. "Jetta!" He's yelling because he can't hear, because he needs to make out his own words through the static and rushing blood in his ears, through the bones rattling under his skin as Amahaki pushes to the surface and insists that Izuku use its power. "Jetta, I can take care of it." Please, he thinks. Please let me take care of this. If anyone gets hurt because he can't use his quirk, he'll never be able to live with himself. Previous conversation with Jetta be damned. Izuku can feel his mentor's hesitance, but it only lasts until that Nomu decides to move, running straight toward Manuel and the firefighters. "Do it! I give you permission to use your quirk." As she says that, her own quirk blooms out of her, a shroud of twilight littered with stars, settling on the street around them. It's the first time Izuku had seen it. Though he has known of its existence, it's beautiful, and if he had a moment longer to stare at it, to pick it apart, he would. As it is, his glove is off before Jetta has even finished the sentence, and Amahaki is all but bursting at the seams when Izuku raises his hand and releases. He fights for control. Fights to not use too much energy. If this puts him out of commission tonight, it'll be worth it, but not worth it enough. There are too many more people to save. Too many flickering fires of life that can't go out just because he overdoes it here. All these years spent learning how to control Amahaki's power and emotions will be for naught if he can't walk away from this fight on his own 2 feet. Izuku curls his fingers inward, and the Nomu freezes in place, gravity weighing it down. Cracks appear in the pavement below its feet, and it sinks a centimeter, and then 3. Red marks, swirling and jagged, curl around Izuku's forearm, and he grits his teeth around their familiar cold burn and the tingling sensation they leave on his skin. It's the perfect amount of power, just enough to override what he knows would be a regenerative or healing quirk of some kind. "Thank you." The Nomu screeches again, trying to fight the hold, but gravity is a universal law. It's not an adaptation to a changing environment. It's not an evolution pulling the strings of an already apex species. It's not laced into any living creature's DNA. Gravity is an undeniable and inescapable truth, and for Izuku, that truth lives in his bones and shares late-night conversations with him and comforts him in its own way when he feels like everything in his life is tipping past the point of being salvageable. In all realities, but especially in this one, the Nomu never stood a chance against Aizawa Izuku, hero persona aptly named Void, the boy who killed out of fear and love and an unshakable need to protect. With a twist of Izuku's hand, between one blink and the next, the Nomu simply stops existing. 44. When the spray of blood takes to the air, some of it fizzling on the heat of the fire, some of it settling like mist on the pavement, Izuku pulls his glove on and feels the marks on his arm recede into his palm. No exhaustion rises up his spine. No nausea climbs up his throat. He's not panicking. He's not afraid. He is void of anything that could shake him from his job, from his duty, and his need to protect as many people as he can. A small star, white and flickering, lands in his upturned palm. It blinks at him for a moment before fading away, and a little zing of energy settles itself into Izuku's body. That's right. This is Jetta's quirk. A little dome of twilight with stars that twinkle and fall and heal and hide. It's powerful in its own right, and it's beautiful to look at. His eyes lift to find hers, and she's staring at him the same way she had when he confessed to sins that were finally too heavy to carry on his own. Like she's sad but proud. Like she knows. Holy! Manuel's voice drags Izuku's gaze away. Thanks for that. The hero's smile is steady, but Izuku can hear the fear at the edge of his voice, whether that's fear left over from the death that he was almost thrown into by the Nomu, or fear of the ease of which Izuku dispatched a creature the size of an elephant with the power to rival All Might. Well, Izuku isn't sure he wants to know. A hand settles on Izuku's upper arm, and he turns once again to find Jetta looking at him. Her expression is more controlled now, but Izuku, for just a moment, thinks he catches something like relief in the lines around her eyes. She turns her head and calls over her shoulder. "Backdraft! Manuel, we'll leave this to you. If we find your intern, we'll send him back this way." "Take care of yourselves." Backdraft returns, the fire in front of him almost extinguished. Jetta jerks her head to the side, and Izuku's quick to return with a nod. Side by side they take off, searching for others to help. For nearly an hour, Izuku and Jetta work together to guide civilians out of the area. Some are trapped in rubble, some are confused and lost, others are in shock. They do their best to be calming presences and get people moving towards safety, even if they can't escort them all the way there. They don't catch sight of Ida the whole time. "Jetta," Izuku says in a moment where they're jogging away from one group of civilians in search of the next. "I have a bad feeling." She glances sideways at him. Sick nausea feeling or gut instinct feeling? Gut instinct feeling. Izuku has felt something like this before, just as the warp gate opened at the USJ, and all those villains poured out into the plaza. Something bad is about to happen, or already has. Jetta swears softly and rotates around 360 degrees and his eyes scanning the area. "Trust your gut, kid. Where does it want you to go?" "Up." Izuku takes off running, finding a fire escape and racing to scale it as quickly as possible. He jumps over the railings to cut the corners and doesn't care how loud he is as he pounds his way up the metal steps. The twist in his gut is telling him that he needs to hurry, that speed is more important than stealth, and he's inclined to listen to it. With Jetta running in his wake, Izuku hauls himself up to the roof and sprints to the edge. They're once more in a part of town where roof jumping is possible, and Izuku takes advantage of that, only looking down when he's already in the air. It's only 5 minutes later when Amahaki flares inside of him, the static in his skull reaching a fever pitch, and his eyes land on 2 bodies in an alleyway. With the pace that he's been keeping, Izuku has to roll to a stop on the next roof, but as soon as he can, he has his feet under himself and he sprints back to the ledge. Jetta lands, rolls, and joins him, but Izuku is beyond paying attention to her presence, far too clouded by fear. The urge to just jump down into the alley is a strong one, but Izuku resists against the reckless need to save, and against the thrashing of Amahaki with the urge to protect, and decides to look first instead. Leaning over the edge, Izuku gets a better view of what he had seen before, and from this angle he can see that there aren't 2 bodies in the alley. There are 3. Off to one side, someone's prone on the ground with what looks like a blood stain soaking through their back. In the dim light, Izuku thinks their outfit is a hero costume, but from this distance it's difficult to tell for sure. At the back of the alley, right up against the dead end, is Ida, obvious from the suit of armor that is his hero costume. Izuku has been looking for his classmate all night. There's no way he would mistake him for anyone else. There's blood on him, too, gleaming nearly black against the shoulder and chest plates of his costume. It's the third person that Izuku shies away from, not recognizing them by appearance, but knowing in his soul exactly who that is. "Call for backup," Izuku says without looking at Jetta. His eyes are caught on the way that Ida isn't moving, on the words he can't make out coming from Stain. "That's the hero killer. We can't take him by ourselves." "Shit," Jetta swears, but her hand is already moving for her phone. "If I jump down there to save Ida, would using my quirk be considered self-defense?" He has to ask. He is going to jump down anyway, because it looks like Stain's monologue is coming to an end, and Izuku isn't ready to see a classmate die tonight. But the odds of him winning will increase exponentially if he can pull Amahaki into the fight. From his periphery, he can see Jetta turn to him, but he has no idea what sort of expression she's making. Half of a second later, she says, "Yeah, I'm right behind you." She's a good hero. She's a great mentor, but most of all, she understands. Izuku doesn't need another body on his conscience, another ghost to carry, and neither does she. He's over the edge of the roof in the next second, using every ounce of the parkour skills his dad taught him over the years to jump safely down the fire escape. Stain turns to look at him first, eyeing him up as he drops to the ground and rises from his crouch. Takes a moment longer for Ida's eyes to find him. "Void, what are you doing here? Get away, this isn't your fight," Ida yells, mouth moving while the rest of his body stays rigid. The paralysis is something that Izuku already figured out about Stain's quirk. The only thing he doesn't know is the trigger, but he doesn't have time to think about that right now, because Ida's words knock around in Izuku's head in a way that doesn't make sense. His eyes narrow. "What do you mean this isn't my fight? I'm saving you!" Slowly, cautiously, Izuku begins circling Stain. It would be smarter to keep his distance. The katana in the villain's hand is enough of a clue that he's a close-range fighter. But in order to prevent further harm to Ida, Izuku's going to have to get in between them. Stain chuckles and flicks blood off of the sword as he turns to face Izuku properly. "Save your time, little hero," he hisses the word. "This one here doesn't deserve to live. He's not a true hero. He sought me out for revenge." Izuku hates how much that makes sense. But more than that, he hates that he didn't see this coming. He'd had a bad feeling that Ida would do something stupid. It was why he followed him to Hosu, but he'd never thought that Ida would be the one to find Stain. No, he always thought that it would be the other way around, that Ida would be looking, but that, ultimately, Stain would either stay completely hidden or make the first move. Instead, Ida had turned to vigilantism. Aizawa was going to have to give that speech again. "He's a child," Izuku says, instead of rising to the bait. He's not going to yell at Ida for his stupidity when there's a villain to deal with. "You nearly killed his brother. Of course he's angry." Stain hisses. "I left Ingenium alive, when I could have easily slain him." "And you think that's a mercy?" Around them, a sudden twilight falls and tiny stars dangle in the air. Most of them land on Ida and the prone person, but some of them circle around Izuku as if waiting. The stars avoid Stain completely. "Oh?" Stain tilts his head up, looking around at the rooftops. "I know this quirk. Don't make me kill you, Jetta. You're not a false hero who needs to be eliminated." Much closer than Izuku was expecting, Jetta says, "I have no intentions of dying tonight, hero killer." Faster than Izuku can track, Stain pulls a knife from somewhere on his person and throws it in the direction of Jetta's voice. If that had been aimed at Izuku, he wouldn't have had time to dodge, but Jetta is long gone by the time the knife makes its way to where she would have been, and it clatters uselessly against the wall of the alley, and then to the ground. Izuku can't see her, but he knows she's there. Her quirk, Twilight Sanctuary, is twofold. The most well-known part of it is that the stars fall through it and they carry minor healing properties. They aren't powerful like Recovery Girl's kisses, but they can stabilize the dying or revitalize someone on their last legs. The second part, which is usually kept secret, is that Jetta can blend herself in with the sanctuary. As long as she's inside of its boundaries and her hair is loose and her hero costume is on, she's nearly invisible. That does, however, mean that Izuku can't use Amahaki's power. He can't very well drop a black hole within the alley while he can't see where Jetta is. He can't risk hurting her like that, so he does the only other thing he can do, and he backs up to where Ida's on the ground. "You're an idiot," he hisses, stepping over him so that he can keep his eyes on Stain, who's trying to find Jetta amongst the falling stars. "You're sitting here on death's door telling me to run? You tracked down the hero killer. What did you think was going to happen?" Shut the fuck up." From a pouch on his belt, Izuku yanks out a roll of gauze and shoves it blindly under a gap in Ida's armor. The responding hiss of pain and the wet warmth that slides over Izuku's fingers tells him he found the wound. "You're 15 years old, and you think you can handle the villain who put your brother in the hospital? The villain who killed Ironjaw and Ringtoss and Velvet? You think you're better than them?" He puts more pressure on the wound than strictly necessary, and the pained wheeze that leaves Ida's throat is kind of satisfying. He thinks that if Jetta can keep Stain turning in circles, they can wait for backup just like this. Safely cocooned inside Jetta's sanctuary, far away from death's door, Ida will live, whoever the other person is will hopefully live, if they're not dead already, and he and Jetta won't have to properly engage at all. Then the worst thing that could happen does. Stain, who had been slowly rotating on his heels, suddenly slashes out with his katana. There's a sharp gasp, a sucking in of breath that sounds too weak, too winded to really do anything more than make noise. Izuku blinks, and the sanctuary dissolves, leaving them all back in the dimly lit alley. Jetta's a little over a meter away from Stain, and the front of her costume is slashed diagonally and weeping red. "Run," she says, but when her gaze meets Izuku's, it pins him to the spot, rooting him with his back to the dead end and his injured classmate at his feet. Stain drags his tongue in one long swipe over his blade, and Jetta's whole body locks up. She falls to the ground, crumpling on her side like a discarded marionette. Distantly, Izuku registers the activation method for Stain's quirk, but it's impossible to think clearly when his brain has stalled on the overwhelming amount of blood spilling down Jetta's front. "What now, little hero?" Stain says as he turns to Izuku, the last one standing, last one able to fight. "Will I cut you down like Ingenium, or will you join your master in death?" Izuku's gaze hasn't moved from Jetta since the sanctuary fell. She's breathing, it's short and labored, and with the amount she's bleeding, she won't last much longer, but she's still alive. Izuku could listen to her last command. He could try to run, to track down the help he hopes is already on its way, or he could use the permission he's been given and stand his ground with Amahaki. Even in a situation like this, staring down a villain who honestly scares him more than the Nomu do, Izuku doesn't really think he has a choice. Run and be irreparably maimed, or fight and maybe win. It's a strong maybe, but he'd rather have the chance. Jetta can kill him for it later if they both live through it. Gritting his teeth, Izuku gets to his feet and steps over Ida's body, firmly planting himself between his classmate and Stain. Ida says something, a strange stream of curses and pleas, but Izuku tunes him out. Jetta's toward the edge of the alley, so Izuku has the whole middle to work with. Amahaki isn't great in close quarters, but Izuku has become really good at pinpoint control on the size and placement of his black holes, and he's been practicing channeling Amahaki in other ways. He can do this. "Death it is," Stain says, and he doesn't sound disappointed. Izuku reaches to pull off his glove. Faster than he can blink, Stain is in his face and a white-hot pain shoots through Izuku's hand and raises up his arm. Years of abuse at the facility keep Izuku from screaming, even when he looks down to find a long knife stabbed through his right hand, severing bone, and years of training with Aizawa keep him from locking up from the overwhelming pain and fear racing through him. The static in his ears is loud, and Amahaki is a distraction as it rattles the cage of Izuku's ribs, but he throws out his foot and kicks at Stain's knee. The villain dodges, but that's fine. Izuku doesn't need him to go down, he just needs him to move around, to back up, to not take the knife out. Holy shit, no. Izuku jerks his hand up and back, away from Stain's grasping fingers, gritting his teeth through the pain as he subsequently drives the blade further through his hand. It hurts, and black spots dance in his vision, but he doesn't care. I'll see you in hell, Izuku gasps and then brings his left hand to his mouth and rips off his glove with his teeth. Izuku had held Amahaki inside of him for years. He doesn't know the exact date and time the last piece of the god was shoved under his skin. Time was not something he was ever allowed in the facility after all. But he's pretty sure it's been close to 5 or 6 years at this point. In all that time, Izuku has always called for the power from his right hand first. He never put any thought into why. The mark on his right palm, the one that looks like a stylized eye, is the one that formed first. It was the only way to access the power while more and more of Amahaki was surgically shoved into him. But even after the mark on his left palm formed, the one that looks like nothing, just slashes of red that bleed into black, he always went to his right hand first. He thought nothing of it for a long time, and when Aizawa eventually asked about it, Izuku assumed it was just a harmless habit. Never, not even once, had it crossed his mind that it was instinct. Izuku's used to Amahaki's power sitting under his skin until he asks for it, even with his palms exposed. The moment he had his left glove off, the air shifts, and power explodes out of him. Stain is knocked back from the force of it, and so is Jeddah and the other prone person. He hears Ida's armor clash into the wall behind him, too. Izuku's vision swims and then glitches, the alley around him turning into a sea of things he doesn't understand. The walls crumble, but he blinks, and they're whole again. A towering creature he's never seen before, and couldn't have ever dreamed of, swims through the open air past the mouth of the alley, and he forgets what it looks like the moment it's gone. He feels like he's floating. He feels like he's sinking. Gravity, something that Izuku has never struggled with, seems to weigh on his joints and drag him toward the center of the earth. What is this? Panic sweeps into and out of him, overwhelming him one moment and slipping out of his grasp the next. Amahaki's multitude of voices fill Izuku's mind easier than they ever have. The other side of my power. I told you. I exist between realities. Oh, fuck. The glitches Izuku is seeing around him aren't glitches, they're other realities. The crumbled walls, the flashes of sunlight and the moonlight, and then a grassy field and an endless pit of stars, all visible to him for seconds or less, before the reality he calls home tries to right itself. Izuku's hair whips on a wind that isn't there, or maybe it is. Stain can't seem to get to his feet. Whatever this is, Izuku doesn't know how to control it, and he really doesn't want an alley fight between himself and Stain to be where he learns. This power scares him, more than he's able to fully grasp right now. He doesn't think he'll ever touch it again, but it's given him the space and time he's been needing. With a pained grunt, Izuku rips the knife from his right hand and throws it aside. He clenches his left hand into a fist, and all that power snaps out of existence, leaving Izuku winded and barely standing on trembling legs. This is stupid. He's about to be incredibly stupid. Quirk exhaustion is not an issue for him, but Izuku is on the last stretches of his stamina anyway, after whatever the fuck that was. He ignores the fact that he knows what that was, knows that he just dipped his toes and his mind into something not made for humans, into something that Amahaki holds dominion over, into something that he'll have nightmares about for as long as he lives. He ignores the fact that in one of those realities Ida had been dead. He ignores the fact that in one of those realities the person who got cut down in front of him was Aizawa, not Jeddah. He ignores the fact that in one of those realities Izuku had tasted blood on his teeth and had been tempted to walk out of the alley with Stain. Whatever his nightmares chose to throw at him, in the future is not his business, not right now. Instead, wincing and whimpering through pain, Izuku takes off his right glove, keeps his left hand folded in it on itself as tightly as he can. He doesn't have time to try to put his left glove back on. Stain is already getting to his feet, and Izuku now knows that his throwing knives are just as deadly and accurate as his katana. Izuku twitches his right hand at his side, and Stain goes flying into one of the alley walls. His head cracks against the brick, and Izuku can see the whites of his eyes before his body slumps. Fuck. Fuck. All that fighting, Ida stabbed, an unknown person, hopefully only unconscious, Jeddah slashed open across her chest, Izuku with a knife wound in his hand and exhaustion welling up inside of him, and what brought Stain down was a single fucking black hole hovering in just the right location. If Izuku had been faster, none of this would have happened. Stumbling forward, Izuku eventually falls to his knees at Jeddah's side. He pulls his gloves back on, and it aggravates the wound in his hand, but he doesn't care. He spends several seconds fumbling with the pouches on his belt before he's able to pull out more gauze, and he presses it over as much of Jeddah's wound as he can. Though the cut is too long for him to be much help, she's still breathing, but she's not conscious. Void. Ida's voice. We need to get them out of here. Void. Izuku sways. There's black creeping into his vision that has nothing to do with the late hour or the occasional appearance of Amahaki. Tie up Stain, he says, blinking hard against the urge to slip into unconsciousness. And if I... He tastes blood and spits it out. It's black in the limited light. If I wake up to him being dead, Ida, I swear to God... Truthfully, he doesn't know what he would do, but he hopes that the sincerity of his threat is evident in his words because he will follow through. Right now, though, he just wants to sleep. Where the fuck is the backup that Jeddah had called? Down here, Ida yells, loud enough to make Izuku flinch, but when he blinks and lifts his head from his fallen mentor, he sees other people, some of them heroes. Ah, there they are. Help her first, Izuku says when someone kneels beside him. I'm not injured badly. Help her. It's okay, they say. I've got it from here. You did good. A whole lot of good, that's what. Izuku gasps, tears springing to his eyes without warning and falling down his cheeks faster than he can stop them. Please, don't let her die. It would be like losing Auntie Kayama, and he doesn't know exactly how this world would change afterwards, but he knows it would be devastating. I need some stretchers down here, they yell, turned away from Izuku to focus fully on Jeddah. Good. That's where their attention needs to be. He opens his mouth to point toward the still unidentified person against the opposite wall, but the blackness in his vision and the static in his head has other ideas. Izuku's unconscious before he hits the ground. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 38 of Swallow the Stars. Chapter 39 will be next. Hope you all are still enjoying this fic, and as always, thank you so much for listening.